But one thing before we get started, how heavy do you think the heaviest human being ever recorded is?
In what kilos?
Anything?
Equivalent to 3 elephants. No. 250 kilos.
Oh, not even
Nowhere near.
remotely
I
close.
wouldn't know. I'm being really generous here.
I mean, that's a huge person.
That is a huge person. How big is it?
Way bigger. More than double.
Oh God.
More than double.
700?
Kilos?
Yeah.
Like not a million miles away, so 635.
635. Jesus.
Yeah, 600. I mean, you see these people on those shows like My 600-Pound Life, and they're enormous. And yet these people weigh double that. I don't understand how it's possible. Like, how does your body accumulate that, and how does it work? How does it function?
How does it function, for sure?
Yeah.
God, yeah, and then everything is under strain. Do they move? I bet they're just bed bound.
There's no way they can move, surely.
Not completely bed bound.
Yeah, must be. Movement matters.
It does.
So if we're saying, and we are, that movement matters, that kind of presupposes the idea that there is a gradient associated with it, as in it can be good and it can be bad. Because if it's all the same, then it doesn't matter. So that's just a philosophical start to the conversation.
Well, we're starting deep already, John. Goodness.
Well, because it's like there is this rejection of the idea that movement quality really exists, which is really strange. Because I think there's a few just really easy, just logical ways that you can prove that there is good and bad movement. But I suppose we should talk about like why do people think that there is no such thing as good movement? And the main thing about that is that the standards that the industry has set for what is good and bad, traditionally, don't predict performance and don't predict injury. And so then they're like, see, it doesn't matter if your squat's really ugly, you can still lift loads of weight, and you still will get injured at the same rate as someone who's got a beautiful squat. But what's beautiful is, like, there's definitely objective things that categorize beautiful movement. But there's also, like, there is a perspective built into that. We mentioned this in the last podcast about how I get referred people who I get told ahead of time they're a brilliant mover. And I watch them squat up and down, and yeah, it's beautiful, and they can hinge perfectly, and they've got a great bench press and blah, blah, blah. But their movement in between those exercises is, from my perspective, horrifying. And I'm like, oh, no wonder they're in pain. And so for me, I'm looking at them like they're a bad mover who can do these things, other things well.
Yeah.
But it's important, and we will get to it, to define like, what am I seeing when I'm saying someone's a bad mover? What am I seeing? And when they say someone's a great mover, what are they not seeing?
Yeah, okay.
In other contexts. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure.
I want to put you on the spot.
Oh, no.
I want you to answer a question that the entire industry for decades has been unable to answer.
Okay.
And you've got to nail it.
Okay. Oh, God. No pressure.
No.
No pressure then.
What do you think is good movement?
What do I think good movement, or like what my definition of good movement is?
Yeah.
Someone that moves fluidly with the least amount of resistance, and maybe expanding on that slightly, is, I suppose, integrated movement, so their body working together to move them forward. Yeah.
I like bits of that.
Yeah.
So
that's probably, I would need to write that down and make it make English, but
well, and like
but yeah.
refine it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'd put you on the spot
Yeah.
because it's an incredibly difficult question that, as far as I'm aware, no one else has ever actually answered. So like, it's a difficult thing just to drop you into. But like, so fluidly, great, yeah, we love that. And we can see that intuitively. We can say, oh, that's such a fluid mover. But it's hard to define what that is. Like when you watch someone who's fluid and someone who's not, to objectively identify what's the difference between those two people's movement strategies is difficult. And this then, again, we'll kind of keep coming back to this. A reason why people say, well, movement quality doesn't exist or is irrelevant is that we can look at people that most people would say, oh yeah, they're not the most fluid mover, but they don't get injured and they can still perform at a really high level in certain aspects.
Okay.
So that's interesting. And I think a big part of it is that we confuse someone who is athletic and someone who's an athlete. So an athlete is someone who's good at sport, usually good at a sport in particular. But if someone's athletic, for me, I think that promotes this idea of versatility.
Yeah.
And that they're good across the board at a number of different things.
Yeah.
And that they can, I think one of the big ones for me is that they can pick up new skills really quickly. So I can give them an exercise they've never seen before, and then they take to it really efficiently.
Yeah.
So like that's part and parcel of it. And for me, I've got people in mind when I say, oh, so-and-so's a good mover. I think about the people who pick up the stuff that I coach really quickly. Obviously, that's going to be my bias.
Yeah.
I think of them as being good movers, rather than people who are necessarily like really good at a sport. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, like Crystal's a great example. 'Cause she's never done any sport and still doesn't do any sport.
No.
One of the best movers I've ever met in my life.
100%, yeah.
So I wouldn't describe her as an athlete, but I would describe her as athletic,
Yep.
incredibly athletic.
Yep.
One of the most athletic people who comes here, which is interesting, because she's not necessarily the most flexible or the strongest person who uses the gym, but I would say she's like top 2 or 3 movers that we've ever had.
Yep. Okay.
So for me and my definition, like how I came up with the definition, a lot of it started like intuitively and speculatively. So like I'd be coaching people and I would just coach what I saw. No real like objective reasoning behind it, no logic necessarily, but I would be like, I just don't like how that looks. And I would ask them how it feels, and they'd be like, yeah, like they'd be doing a chiropractor hinge. And they'd be like, yeah, I'm feeling it in my lower back and my calf. And I'm like, that's interesting. It looks pretty good
Yep.
from most perspectives, but why are they feeling it in these places that we're not targeting? Why are they not feeling any glue?
Yep.
And I'd be like, well, I think it would look more just athletic and lithe and fluid if you turned here and just shifted there
Yep.
and coiled here. And then when they did that, they'd be like, oh, I feel loads of glue. I'm like, oh, okay, that was interesting. So there were just things like that, times that by thousands and thousands of reps with different people over the years.
Yep.
And then the stuff that started speculatively, if it worked and made predictions and was consistent across a number of different people, that kind of went into my box of, right, that thing that they're doing, that is characteristic of good movement. And then the stuff where I was like, make this change here, or shift your weight there, or turn here. If that didn't create a meaningful change somewhere, like a preferential muscle recruitment, or a reduction in pain, or just whatever, then I would discard that from my definition. I'm like, okay, that's obviously not. I think at the time, like, I think that would look good, but then I find that it's actually got no basis.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. So what is your definition, word for word?
My definition comes down to 3 things that I observe. It used to be 4, but the reason it's not 4 is because if you do the other 3, then by definition you're doing the 4th one.
Got you, okay.
The 3 things that I've still kept overlap massively. So the 3 words are coherence, distribution, correspondence.
Got you, okay.
And I'll go through like what each of those means. So coherence means that as someone's performing a physical task, everything that's moving in the system individually is moving in a way that is conducive towards the goal.
Okay.
So the most basic example of that is if you're picking something off the floor, I want to see flexion. Flexion through the spine, I want to see flexion at the knees, etc. So I might see protraction through the shoulders. So all these joint actions should all come together
Yep.
to produce that output. And one thing that I kept seeing from people who've got sciatica, who've got lower back pain, or just anything, is that you would see an incoherent movement at one or more joints.
Got you.
So you would see people picking something off the floor, flexion through the spine, protraction through the shoulders, but extension at the knees.
Got you.
So I can kind of demonstrate that for the YouTube audience. So as I'm bending over, instead of seeing this, I'd see someone
Yep.
tip back like that. And it's amazing how many people do that because it's incoherent. You've got a joint that is actively making the job harder for you to pick that thing off the floor.
Yep.
So that's a big one. And that's like a really common and basic way of seeing it. But then you can obviously apply that to every other physical action that someone might do. So if we apply it to gait cycle, if I want to see coherence, I want to see internal rotations stacking on top of each other side to side.
Yep.
And I want to see external rotations and expansion on the other side.
Yep.
So I want to see someone shifting weight. Let's say they're taking a step forward and they're landing on the right foot. I want to see all the internal rotation stuff happening on the right side.
Yep.
So I want to see a little bit of foot pronation. I want to see internal rotation at the hip. I want to see a coil on the right rib cage. I want to see those things all happening. And then reciprocation on the other side.
Yep.
And that's all coherent. Then the next one plays into that because if we're talking distribution, if you're moving coherently, let's go back to the first example of picking something off the floor. If you're moving coherently, almost by definition, we're seeing good distribution through the system. So if I'm picking something off the floor and I've got flexion in a dozen joints, then I've got minimal flexion at each of them, and it contributes to an overall bigger output.
Yep.
If I've got loads of extension at the knee, not only have I got this incoherent movement happening at the knee, I then need higher amounts of flexion at all my other joints. So to perform the exact same task, I'm moving way more. And it's kind of surprising how much more actual movement has to happen at a single joint to create the same output.
Yeah.
So that's distribution. Distribution for me also, rather than talking about like people who are in pain, I think distribution is more important when it comes to performance. So if you step off a box and land on the floor, you want to see a distributed stress absorption.
Okay.
I don't like that word, but stress absorption strategy. So again, you want to see flexion at lots of joints. So I want you to bend your knees and your hips.
Yep.
If you try to step off a really high box and only bend through your hips, you're not distributing that stress, and it's going to feel pretty bad.
Yep.
And so I think one of my best visuals for distribution is to think of a throwing pattern. So it's this really, really big, exaggerated movement. It's probably like the sort of, I'm using the word gross in terms of big rather than disgusting.
Yeah.
Like it's like the grossest movement that a human can do.
Yeah.
You coil as much as possible and you like whip as much as possible and you turn loads and you have this really big extension.
Yeah.
Very rarely, only in part like baseball pitchers or something who've got hyper elastic shoulders.
Yeah.
You very rarely see any individual joint moving through more than 90 degrees,
Okay.
which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we think of 90 degrees as being quite a short range of motion.
Yeah.
And we think of a throwing pattern as being this really exaggerated overall movement.
Yeah.
But on an individual joint basis, it's still quite small movements that accumulate into a massive rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where distribution comes in. And then correspondence, very similar to coherence. So this is where every joint action or bit of muscle activity that I see needs to correspond to the output. So the reason this is separate from coherence is that you can see a coherent joint action, but it doesn't necessarily correspond to the output.
Right.
And obviously, ideally, I want to see both. I think the best example for this is with a squat, where some people don't necessarily correspond the knee extension to the movement of the weight.
Right.
So if someone does like a beautifully upright squat, then their quads are likely pushing really hard into the ground, and every like kilogram that they push of force into the ground, they're getting a kilogram of lift through the barbell.
Right.
But you can see someone do like a quote unquote stripper style squat,
Yeah.
where the hips shift up, the knees shift backwards, they almost end up bent over, and then their back has to almost
Yep.
like good morning the weight up. They have got the same start point at the bottom of the squat, the same end point, but the knees have kicked back, so the knee extension hasn't corresponded to the upward movement of the
Yeah.
barbell. So that's where correspondence
Yep.
comes in.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Do all of those make sense?
Yeah, and I was coaching hip chambers this morning, and one of the adjustments was
That's a great example of an exercise where you can see those three things
really,
happening.
really clearly, and it's again one of my favorites to coach.
Yeah, same.
Is the planted foot, the working leg on the floor. As soon as there was tension coming through from the back foot attached to the cable, the knee went backwards, and then it was just like they were just standing up.
Yep.
And we want obviously continuous movement forward.
Continuous movement forward because that's coherent.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
if I'm trying to run forward, and you can see this on sprinters, right? So when they drive out the blocks, they have knee extension happening, obviously, but their knee doesn't move backwards.
No. Yeah.
Same thing with like plantar flexion. As they push their foot into the ground, we're getting plantar flexion, but the heel's not dropping down. Whereas you'll see in polearm movers, when they go from like a stiff launch position, when they push, heel drops, knee goes backwards.
Yeah. And then they come up.
And then they go up as a
Yeah.
result of that because the shin angle's changed.
Yeah.
You'll always go in what direction your shin's pointing at.
Yeah.
And so we've created an incoherent movement of the knee and the ankle. We've created poor distribution because again, now we're seeing like too much length through the hamstring instead of hip extending over
Yeah.
a fixed knee position.
Yeah.
And then we haven't got correspondence because now their push is just moving their joints backwards rather than their body forwards.
100%. Yeah.
So we've got those three failures
Yeah.
that we can observe. There.
Yeah, hip chambers is definitely one of the ones that is, I find it really obvious. It's a really obvious one to see where they're distributing that weight
Yep.
with that, for sure.
Yep.
And yeah, really simple tweak is basically knee flexion. We want as much as possible for you to effectively have propulsion forward, keep it going forward, and then lots more glute.
Yeah,
And
and that's the thing is
yeah.
you coach them to do a better job from those three things, and the muscle activity takes care of itself.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, suddenly I feel my glutes, and then
Yeah.
they come off, and oh, my lower back pain's gone. It's
Yeah.
like, right,
There we
cool. and it's through testing those things, I'm like, right, now that I've identified those three things, coherence, distribution, correspondence, now every time I apply them and we get an improvement, we've solved the original problem. Don't even have to think about the symptom, it solves itself by creating good movement. And so this is why I reject the idea that good movement doesn't exist,
Yeah.
because this is so consistent.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like, I can solve anyone's problems and every client who works with me is just immediately better. But this is part of the observation, this is part of the reinforcement of the model, which is that when I work with someone and we don't get the result that we're looking for, it's because, through my own fault as well, whether it's through exercise selection or cueing or coaching or communication or whatever, I haven't seen them create that change.
Yep.
The coherence, distribution, correspondence hasn't improved, and so their symptoms haven't improved.
Yeah.
But whenever I get the change that I'm looking for, we get the change the client wants.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's for me, that's the biggest reinforcement. So even
Yeah.
the people that I don't get a good, successful outcome with, even those people are data points that confirm the validity of
Yeah.
my perspective,
Yeah.
which is cool. Going back to again, more reasons why people don't think that good movement exists. I think I started on this about athletes and being athletic. We think of good movers as being the most effective movers. And I think this is a very easy misinterpretation to make of my perspective when I say that your quality in squat, bench, and deadlift doesn't matter. It's all about the quality of your gait cycle. I think it'd be very easy for people listening to me making those points to say, well, hang on, who's got a better gait cycle than an Olympic sprinter? And they still get injured, loads. And it's like, yeah, okay, there's a massive difference for me in terms of being a good mover and being an effective mover.
Okay.
So again, I'll think of people who are good movers who don't necessarily have like the highest output. So maybe they're not super fit, can't run big distances or can't run very fast.
Yeah.
But they kind of run beautifully from the perspective of those 3 points.
Okay.
But then you'll see people who have an incredibly high output, so these are your athletes, still getting injured. There'll be a flaw in coherence, distribution, and correspondence,
Yeah.
usually because the best athletes are the best compensators. And this is the difference between being an athlete and being athletic, is that if someone's astonishingly fast over 100 meters, they might not be good at other things.
Yep.
So they're probably not the most versatile person in overall athletic endeavors.
Yep.
And you'll see like these extremes of posture, massive anterior tilts, loads of lumbar extension, and that's a performance enhancer. Very flat feet as well, because that's a more propulsive foot.
Yep.
I'm not saying any of those things injure people,
No.
but we see very extreme representations in those people, which, from just an objective perspective, will decrease their ability to distribute force. what they're doing is focusing force in the most specific direction possible to drive them forward.
Got you. Yep.
So great for output, not too good for distribution. And so they might be a very effective mover, but it doesn't necessarily make them athletic
Yeah.
in terms of dealing with a variety of forces, and doesn't necessarily make them a good mover from my perspective.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think the easiest thought experiment for does good movement exist is just to ask someone, do you move better when you're fresh or when you're tired? And that's an easy answer.
Yeah.
So then you can say, what are we seeing from people who are tired when they move? What are the things that they're objectively doing differently to someone who's fresh, or themselves when they're fresh?
Yeah.
How does their movement change by the time they're super fatigued? And what I see is a reduction in those three things: coherence, distribution, correspondence.
Okay.
We see more of that, more early knee extension.
Yeah.
That's just such a common one. Like
Yeah.
that's a really easy one to identify a lot of the time. We see more orientations and less relative motion.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is we'll see the whole body kind of turning all as a fridge,
Yep.
rather than this sort of coiled rotation through the whole
Yep.
system, because that requires tension and suspension, and that's harder to do when you're tired. And yeah, in terms of correspondence, we'll see a big loss in correspondence because you've lost the ability to efficiently transfer force. So another aspect of correspondence, so the fourth one, by the way, that
Yeah,
I
I was-
rejected, is efficiency.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason I took that out is because that's kind of what correspondence is.
Yeah.
So if I'm walking or running, I want, again, like every bit of force that I produce that's pushing into the ground, I want to see that immediately result in a change in the position of my center of mass. I
Yep.
want to see propulsion of my body.
Yep.
And what you'll see from poor movers, and this one, I suppose people who lift weights do fall into this, but people who stretch a lot really fall into this.
Okay.
You'll see loads of movement at the limbs. The center of mass doesn't move very much. So I see what I call tap dancing,
Yep.
where the legs are going all over the place, but the body's not moving very much. And in terms of efficiency and in terms of correspondence, I want to see minimum push and minimum movement through the legs, resulting in maximum output of the body.
Yep.
And when someone gets tired, we'll see they're doing a lot of moving, a lot of pushing, but they're not creating that same level of propulsion.
Yep.
So if you think about when you break into a run and you feel really springy, every little push you just glide. Forward. Yeah. Think about when you're exhausted.
Yep.
You push into the ground and you just kind of sink, and you don't get that same spring, you don't
Yep.
get the same bounce. That is a reduction in correspondence. You're putting the effort in, but you're not getting the return in terms of propulsion.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you find when you are coaching, when you do your exercise selection, do you have exercises that are potentially more complex that you do earlier on when clients are fresh compared to later on when they maybe are not as fresh?
Oh, interesting. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever thought of it like
No,
that.
okay. And you think, so where we're talking about sort of like being fresh and being tired, is this from like what is the perspective that you're thinking here?
I look at other people doing exercise.
Okay, right.
So, I mean, you can feel it on yourself as well. Like
Yeah.
I'm a moderate when it comes to exercise
Yeah.
intensity and prescription. My whole premise is efficiency. So I'm not trying to be the fittest, strongest, fastest representation of myself that I can be.
Yeah.
I'm kind of done with trying to do that. I sort of stopped caring about that. I'm interested in seeing how good can I be at the most number of things with the least amount of effort
Yeah, okay.
possible.
Got you.
Like I don't really want to be exercising.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of exercise in my life. I'm sort of done with it. How little can I get away with doing?
Yep.
It turns out
Very
really little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like deadlifting obviously is like the ultimate example. I probably did like a dozen reps of deadlift in the entire year last year.
Yeah.
And pulled 280 kilos.
Yeah.
Like
Wonderful.
the volume narrative falls apart just with me as a singular data point on that one. So I'm not working to exhaustion much now, but I know how my movement changes when I am exhausted.
Yep.
And I don't train any of my clients to exhaustion either.
No.
If they want to go out and do something exhausting, they can do that in their own time. And I don't discourage them from doing that. Depends on the reasons and depends on the dosing. But that's not something I'm looking to do in my sessions.
Yeah.
I'm looking to make someone move better in a session. I'm looking to develop someone's skill of movement that they can then take out into their other activities.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to supplement. If someone's trying to get fitter, or weight loss is probably the best example to talk about this. If I've got a client who's coming in and their primary goal is to lose body fat, my goal in the hour a week that I maybe see them is not to smash out as many calories as possible in an hour,
Yep.
which it turns out is not very many.
Yep.
And it turns out like your body will compensate for that for the rest of the day and down-regulate the movement. And like the net gain an hour of hard work is very, very minimal.
Minimal, yeah.
But if I can make someone who's relatively sedentary because movement is effortful or painful, if I can make them comfortable moving, then their non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the amount of calories they burn through the day when they're not exercising,
Yep.
goes up enormously. Like, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but you'll probably have better weight loss outcomes if you learn how to fidget than if you learn how to exercise intensely. Yeah, like I'm not exhausting people. I always say, especially when I'm working with weight loss people, because a lot of people who are seeing me for weight loss are really anxious about exercise, because to them a lot of the time it's very intimidating. They know like, I've got to really push today, and it's like it's an intimidating prospect. And some of them have been hurt doing that in the past, and they've just kind of been conditioned to thinking like, it's no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
This is just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so I want them to feel safe. I want them to look forward to the session. And I specifically want them leaving here feeling like they could run a marathon.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want them leaving in a pool of their own sweat like, oh boy, well, at least I burnt an extra 100 calories. I want them leaving feeling great and like bouncing.
Yeah.
That's always my target.
Yeah.
So I'm not really exhausting people. So in terms of picking like a more complicated exercise or one that requires more correspondence, no, I'm not really organizing things from a perspective of fatigue. But depending on the individual, I would. So if I'm working with someone who's hypermobile, they're the most challenging people to coax these improvements out of, in my opinion. I'm probably going to do, the tougher ones, the ones that require more tension. I'm probably going to do those earlier in the session. So hip chambers would almost always be one of the first exercise pairings.
Okay. Yeah.
Wall bridge would be another one, because you just have to maintain that tension.
Okay. Interesting.
Scorpion squat, I'd always do that early.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do that?
No, I probably am still on what I would say is a traditional coaching strategy, which is compound movement, accessory, a bit of cardio, if that's what the client is requiring. I have clients that I don't do that with. I have youth clients where it looks, I would say, completely different, because we want to try and keep moving on as quickly as possible whilst being efficient. And keep it interesting for them, because kids get bored.
Yep, sure.
So no, it isn't. It's something I've always, just probably followed the very traditional line of compound movement, accessory, cardio. But I would always do, like, if I'm doing any sort of circuit training with a client at the end where they specifically want it or ask for it, then I always do it at the end, because I want them to do the heavy, hard, like maybe thinking about it stuff first. Before we then start chucking around whatever we're doing at the end.
Okay,
So,
from that perspective, I completely agree. That is exactly what I do. So I would definitely do it in that order. So there is an order in which you should do things through a session. So if you're doing explosive stuff or jumps or plyos or anything like that, would always do those first. Then I would do heavy stuff, and as I say, like compound stuff. If that's coming into it, then I would do that next. And then as you move to more isolation drills, I would do those last. It's just the most logical way of doing things. And then anything that's endurance-based, or any type of finisher, if you're doing that for fun, I would do that.
I mean, they wouldn't call it fun, but no, definitely. Pliers, I think we'd normally, it would always be something I'd introduce in my warm-up, because it feels less like, I think for a lot, especially, again, a lot of the youth the youth clients, is just getting them to jump around and moving, like it buys in their focus as well. Like before they've even started doing anything, they're bought in, they know where they're supposed to be, their head's in the game kind of thing. And yeah, it can be a nice fun warm up as well.
Yeah.
And it's not just like the traditional shoe the chicken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So do you do a warm up with every client?
No.
Nor do I.
No, I don't.
Why
It
not?
depends who they are. I always, for 90% of my clients, it will be standing on the treadmill and going through like a walk, or just going on the rubber. And that is probably more for a, what do I call it? I've used words before and I can't think now, but like more like a brain dump for them.
Yeah.
So like for clients
I was going to say
come
for
in,
social reasons.
yeah, for 100%
basically.
for social reasons, like clients to come in and for me to go, how's your day been? And they go, blah, 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 ha, and
Yes.
instantly like then
Yeah.
relax. And then we've kind of got that bit out of the way, and then we can, again, they're here, they're, heads in the game for training.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I work with, similar to you, like a whole range of clients from like young athletes, but also through to like full-time working parents, and like where their days are busy and this is the 1 hour of quiet they get in the week. So actually that 2 minutes, 3 minutes of chat is actually essential for them to even be able to do any of this.
Yeah. And I would always do my like dynamic warm up at the track with kids. Would always do that for that reason, because like when you get adults in, they've got stuff to vent to you.
Yeah.
They're usually more chatty than the kids. The kids are often quite quiet. Like, how was school? Good.
Yep.
Cool. Did you get up to much? Not really. Cool. Okay.
Good one.
So having the movements is a way just to kind of get them socially comfortable
Yep.
in the environment, in
For
the
sure.
situation, get on like a wavelength with them,
Yep.
where it's not just the stress of a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Whereas with an adult, it's like, have you been?
Yeah.
And then they just chat.
Yeah, so easy,
Yeah.
so easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it depends. It's not all the kids. A lot of the kids now that I work with, like they know me
After a
well
while,
enough. Yeah. The banter is very, very strong with them all.
Yeah, good.
But yeah, it's definitely. I haven't got like a set warm up. There are exercises that I will pick and choose from. Ones that I like, ones that they like as well.
Yeah.
And then ones that they just detest and give me a boost when I make them do it. But
But they kind of like it.
But they
in a
kind of
resentful
100% like it.
Yeah,
but they
of
tell you, like,
course.
oh, this is horrible. But
There are some things that you'll give to certain clients where like, I'm going to give you this thing that is really hard and horrible. And I don't think it's even very valuable. But your buy-in's going to go through the roof if you do it, because
Yeah.
you just want to do something hard. And like,
Yeah.
I think a sled drag's great for that. Making
Oh,
someone just pull a really heavy sled.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably not really doing anything useful for you
Yeah.
for the most part. Although I think a sled drag is great. But I
yeah,
wouldn't
it
normally
can
go
be.
super
It can be
heavy.
if you do. Yeah, for sure.
But there are some people where I'm like, you just want to feel your quads
Yep.
burning and you want to get your lungs going. So I'll just put 300 kilos in the sled, make you pull it.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Were there any other bits to add in terms of movement quality conversation?
So we talked. So is there good and bad movement? Yes. Or like
There's no doubt there's good and bad
100%.
movement. And if you say this to the average person, they'll completely agree with you. They'll be like, of course there is. And then if you say to them, well, like most physiotherapy literature doesn't really support the fact that there is qualitatively better or worse movement in terms of injury risk, they'll just be like, that's ridiculous.
I've never had that conversation, so maybe I will actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask
Interesting.
anyone who doesn't have a background in S&C
Yeah.
or physio,
Okay.
and they'll all be like, yeah, of course there's good and bad movement.
Yeah.
But if you speak to like a proper evidence-based practitioner,
No.
they're like, well,
What?
strictly speaking, knee valgus doesn't predict knee injuries, and spinal flexion is not necessarily.
Shut up.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that we've tried a few things, that, like we've predicted a few things, like, oh, if you flex your back when you deadlift, it's going to be really bad. You're going to prolapse your disc and ruin your back. It's like, oh, it turns out no. But then to say, well, then there's no parameters in which movement is good or bad, that's just ridiculous to me. It's so stupid.
Yeah, that is bad. Yeah, I was coaching deadlifts recently, probably to Rachel. It must have been to Rachel. And she was saying, my back isn't as straight as yours. And I was like, it doesn't have to be. Like
Your back isn't mine.
your back, yeah, exactly. We are built completely differently. So yours is going to look very different to what mine is look. And she's built very similarly to Joe. And I was like, if you look at Joe's back, she is not what I would say, again, is coming back to what we are traditionally taught how to deadlift, which is very rigid, very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
very compressive. But you look at how much Joe pulls.
Yeah.
And you like.
And the fact, so Joe's been deadlifting heavy for a decade now, like never had a back injury.
Yeah, maybe go then.
Never. she gets a tight piriformis on her right side when she's doing lots of squats. And that's pretty much the extent of any like lifting injury that Jo's ever had. And it's because she has flexion through her lumbar spine, through her thoracic spine specifically. But it's funny as well because like I've had issues with my back from heavy lifting, mostly from squatting. In fact, entirely from squatting. I don't think deadlifts ever bother me at all. And I've got a posture that from a traditional perspective, everyone will be like, oh, that's fantastic. That's exactly what you want it to look like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't feel great.
No, yeah.
And Jo's is, as you say, like more flexed. And especially early on in her career, she was self-conscious about it because people on social media would be like, oh, you need to lower the weight and blah, blah. I was like, dude, her back looks like that when she deadlifts 40 kilos, let alone 160 kilos.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not an ego thing or it's just the shape of her body. And I think that's had a role in protecting her from injury because she has a more expansive representation of her spine.
Yeah.
And we're doing a very compressive sport. And I'm an example of the opposite. Very, very upright, very extended back, like great posture, and doing a compressive activity. And it's been quite uncomfortable for me in lots of scenarios.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is part of an anecdote of how, again, I came to look for an alternative model. So I've had like some intermittent lower back issues through the years, and I've had loads of shoulder issues through the years. Started lifting weights when I was about 12 and had bad shoulders from the age of 14 and would see a physio. And they told me I need shoulders back and down, rotator cuff drills, extension.
Yeah.
And I can remember being driven to school. We used to have quite a long drive to school, so my mind would wander for things like this. And I'd be extending my back and I would sit like this for 45 minutes because I was like, well, physio said I needed more extension through my thoracic spine. And then there was a point where I was training on my own in a private gym, and I did a warm-up squat and racked it and immediately had like blinding pain in my neck and had to lie down on the floor and like could barely breathe for a minute. And I was like, oh shit, I'm in a bit of bother here, I'm in trouble. And I texted my physio friend saying, this has happened, help. And he replied with some good short-term advice. He was like, just try and relax and breathe and like move comfortably, maybe a bit of massage, a bit of heat if you can do that, like get into a hot bath if you can get home, and all of that. And that was all good stuff. And he said, in the long term, the reason this has happened is because you don't have enough thoracic extension. And how far through my career was I at that point? I doubt I'd started my master's.
Okay.
So I was fully in the traditional model.
Yeah.
But hearing that, I was like, hang on. I've got more thoracic extension than certainly any bloke I've ever met, apart from like a gymnast. Like I've got very extendable thoracic spine. How much more do I need before I stop feeling my neck hurt and getting shoulder pain?
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know what the time frame was, maybe a year or two after that, I'd sort of discovered functional patterns and I'd gone and done a course in London.
Yeah.
And we looked at creating space between the shoulder blades and like elevation and expansion of the rib cage, and then creating tension around that with rotation through the obliques and doing rows at the same time, and getting my lats engaged. And I remember coming away from that course feeling totally different about my entire torso. And a lot of it, I was like, I actually need more. It's not necessarily flexion, because I'm not trying to round my back and to compress at the front instead of compress at the back. I'm trying to create three-dimensional expansion, which involves, if I'm at a baseline standing still looking in the mirror, I want to see some parts of my body moving backwards when I take a breath in.
Yeah.
And I want to see just that my spine can move in that direction as well. And so essentially for years, I've been working on trying to round my thoracic spine. And the more I've done that, like the better it's been. I mean, it was probably like doing that FP course and understanding that sort of structural element to what's going on in my shoulders, my spine, learning the compression expansion model about how to distribute pressure through my body, and then picking up rolling rope as well as just a practice to flow.
Yep.
And all of that was like 6 to 8 years ago, that whole phase. And now I don't have shoulder issues ever. and haven't in that entire time.
Yeah.
And it's funny because none of that stuff is specifically designed to make me bench more, but it's meant that I've benched more.
Yeah.
Because I used to run a program, get to the point where I was like, right, we're going above 90%. Oh, my shoulder hurts. And now I can't touch weights for 2 weeks.
Great. Okay. Yeah.
I'd have like an impingement or something, and I literally, it felt awful, and I would have to acutely recover it and then start again.
Yeah.
And now I can do whatever I want with my shoulders.
I mean, Night of the Living Deadlift was a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just go in cold and do whatever.
Yeah.
That was also what I was going to say about warm-ups. Just jumping around a little bit. I had a client who was a surgeon locally, and he came to me for an interesting reason, actually. He was very active. He had a specific goal on the rowing machine. He was doing martial arts. He was cycling to work. He was doing all sorts of stuff, very active. And he said that he felt like his biggest issue was that he wasn't strong enough, but that when he puts in even very modest bit of strength training, he's fucked. And he's like, and I feel like the next day I can't cycle to work, and then I have to miss a martial arts session, and I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And he was like, I feel like there's no option, but I just want to get your take on it. And I was like, I do have a take on this, and we do have options. I think there's ways of strength training. Specifically, this was like one of my like primary targets for a while. Maximal muscle stimulation for minimal joint compression. And that still is a big target.
Yep.
You've probably heard me say that before.
Yeah.
When we do that, we create muscle soreness, but it doesn't seem to impair performance. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so if you get really sore, really worked quads from doing scorpion squats, the next day you can still do anything.
Absolutely fine.
Even if the quads are sore, you still don't have any performance deficit. You don't feel fatigued. If you create that level of soreness through back squats with the bar on your back, like you just can't, you don't have the same output the next day. And funny enough, like I told him that idea, and he's like, well, we'll give it a go. And he was exactly fine. So we literally just added in a load of work onto his regime, and his recovery wasn't impacted, which is amazing. It was like a free dinner.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And I still to this day find that really interesting. I want to test that idea more with more people.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went in 1 week, and I was like, right, and I had it all set up to do scorpion squats, and he was like, something's been bothering me about this. And I was like, what? I was like, we never do a warm-up. And I was like, okay, do you feel you need one? And he was like, well, sort of. And I was like, okay, do you feel you need one, or do you think you feel like you should need one?
Yes.
And he was like, definitely that. And I was like, what we're doing here do you feel like you're at risk of hurting anything? And he was like, no. I was like, because we're not putting any joint in any compromised position. It's just like purely on the muscle.
Yeah.
And he was just like, yeah, no, it does feel fine. And I was like, yeah, well, I think we can warm up with this hard exercise.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, okay. It was almost like it was so unintuitive to him that he couldn't define exactly why he felt like it was a bad idea. But it just didn't quite feel right to him. But then he did go with it, and he was always fine.
And I think that comes down to tradition and what we see happens. I mean, with sport, with previous stuff in the gym, you would come in and you would do 5 minutes on this, and then you would go in the corner and stretch and like foam roll and all these things, right?
Like with rugby, when I played rugby, how many hours did we spend warming up for rugby?
So many.
It was insane.
Yeah.
Like you'd turn up and you'd have a little throw around, and so you'd warm up playing games.
Yeah.
And then you'd stretch, and then you'd do some warm-up drills, then you'd hit some bags, and then you'd stretch again, and then you'd do a team run-through, and then you'd maybe stretch again. And
Yeah, before you even got to actually running around and touching road.
Yeah.
No, I know.
It's pretty nuts. Anyway, the session we were having this conversation, and I was talking about how this idea of, I think if we have the right movements, we don't need warm-ups necessarily.
Yep.
Specific to that individual, I want this to be clear as well. I'm not saying no one should ever warm up for any reason.
Yep.
Warm-ups can be extremely helpful, and for some people they are necessary
100%.
from a protective capacity. But for him, I was like, I just think you're completely fine. And he was like, okay, cool. And funnily enough, Cootie was deadlifting in the gym when we were having this conversation. He was like, but you wouldn't do something like that without warming up. And ironically, Sam was deadlifting 270. Easy weight.
As he does.
Easy weight, Sam, just to warm up. And I was like, what, like that sort of weight? And he was like, yeah. He said, what is that? I was like, it's 270. And he was like, yeah, because like, what would you pick up, without warming up? How heavy would you go without doing some warm-ups. And I was like, funnily enough, exactly that. That's my cold PB is 270. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, like literally it was just loaded one day at the gym and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a crack. And I just went in and I pulled it and it was a 10 kilo PB. And I was like, hey, great.
Yep.
I don't know how many times I've done that. It's like a dozen. I've probably had like a dozen PBs doing it like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of how many times have I picked up something cold, it's hundreds, and like have never hurt myself doing that with deadlifts anyway. I would never do a cold squat. That just seems a bit too
That's
scary
silly.
to me.
No, thank you.
And he was like blown away by it, and he was like, "But don't you need to warm up?" And I was like, "Well, I think if you're moving well, and this was the thing you said right at the start, moving with no resistance. So if there's no friction in your body and you feel fluid to begin with,
Yep.
I just don't think you need.
Yep.
What am I getting out of a
Yep.
out of a preparation? Like,
Yeah.
there's no range of motion I want to improve. Like,
Yeah. And that comes down to like one of the reasons I get clients to jump on a treadmill or something before is like, what have you done today? Like if it's first thing in the morning, they're like, oh, I've been up, done a bit of shopping, I'm like, you feeling good?
Yeah.
I'm like, cool, let's get into it.
but it's
But
5 o'clock and I've been sat at a desk for 8
Yeah,
hours.
we need to move before we move.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it just depends on what it is.
And the individuals.
Yeah,
for
for sure. Yeah.
And I said, look, I'll just sprint. And I got on the treadmill and just did like a sprint. And he thought I was bonkers for jumping on the sprinting.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the last time I warmed up for anything. And I don't play much rugby anymore, but when I do go to a sevens tournament, I don't warm up.
That's just drinking, isn't
Boring.
it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One bicep
I warm
cup,
up from the
two
night
bicep
before.
cup.
Yeah. But yeah, like certainly like the last 4 or 5 rugby tournaments I've played in,
Yeah.
like people have kind of been going along and doing their warm up and doing their stretching. I'm like,
I think is there for some team sports or individual sports, do you think there's an element of the psychological? Yeah, ritual, exactly.
For
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I used to pack my bag in a certain way the night before, and if I
Yeah.
didn't, I was like, I'm going to have a terrible game.
the biggest thing I miss about rugby, maybe not the biggest, one of the big things I miss about rugby is just the psychology before the game. The idea of getting together, seeing your mates like arriving one by one,
Yeah.
and like knowing like we're going to war in a bit, and like,
Yeah.
like I love that feeling.
Yeah.
And just like getting in the zone. That's the biggest thing I miss about like doing proper powerlifting training is this idea of like going to bed the night before and knowing I've got a big squat tomorrow and I need to rev up for it. And waking up in the morning, like my whole singular purpose is I need to hit this big lift. Now I just kind of just do it when I feel like it. And, and like, and what's
Because
funny
it
is
can.
like the weights are the same or bigger.
Yeah.
But I miss the feeling of having structured training where I was like, I know in 3 weeks I'm doing a really big triple. And everything would like gear around that
Yeah.
target. And I'd come in and it would be that same feeling of I'm going to war with this weight. And I miss the psychology of that. I miss being in that headspace.
Yeah.
But I don't miss putting 200 kilos on my back and sitting
Feeling
down
like
and
shit.
standing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because squatting well doesn't mean shit.
Doesn't mean shit.
But moving well means everything.
That's what matters, John.
Movement matters.